So this time when I say my name is Leonard Sledge, can everybody just shout, "Hi, Leonard," for the recording? Is that too much to ask?
Or we could just do the norm thing. You walk up and go, "What's going on?" How we greet you every time we get our room.
Okay, here we go. Welcome, everyone. Now I'm going to turn it over to Leonard Sledge, the Director of the city's Economic Development Department and the Executive Director of the City of Richmond's Economic Development Authority.
Thank you, Maritza. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Leonard Sledge. That was beautiful. I have the privilege of serving as the Director of Economic Development and the Executive Director of the EDA for the City of Richmond, and really want to extend a heartfelt thank you to Maritza and the team that's worked to put on this site visit today. We're really appreciative of your time and interest in the City of Richmond. We really do believe that Richmond continues to achieve greater levels of success from an economic development standpoint. Everything that we're doing, striving to accomplish, to achieve, being the best city possible, providing world-class services for our citizens. We are staunch believers in equitable economic development, recognizing that, as Cambridge Dictionary describes it, real economic development is when both economic and social conditions change for the betterment of people. Today, again, another welcome on behalf of our EDA board. Richmond City Council, we embarked on a process as it relates to the city center opportunity a long time ago, and Maritza is going to walk through that. But one of the things that I'd like to express to everyone before Brandon Hinton comes up is that the EDA has the wonderful opportunity to help be a steward of this redevelopment project and program. I'd also like to acknowledge Matt Welch, who came in. Matt's a senior policy advisor on our team as well, and does a lot of this heavy lifting with us. The city transferred ownership of the Coliseum parcel to the EDA several months ago, and Richmond Redevelopment and Housing Authority also transferred the historic Blues Armory and several other adjacent parcels to the EDA as well. So the EDA is the sole property owner for this 9.5 acre project that we're endeavoring to complete. And we believe that working with the city, working with the Greater Richmond Convention Center Authority, we're going to help to drive a successful redevelopment project that is long overdue here in City Center. And so, again, just thank you guys for coming out. Looking forward to the responses to the proposals that will be coming in, and just rolling up our sleeves and creating the best opportunity possible for Richmonders. And so with that, Brandon, if you'd just like to come on up and share a few words. But again, thank you again, everyone.
Thanks, Leonard. That's a tough act to follow right there. And while Leonard is very well spoken, I actually wrote up a couple of notes, so I don't want to forget anything here. But good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brandon Hinton. I'm the Deputy County Manager for Administration for Henrico County. But in the role that I'm speaking from this afternoon is from, as you heard earlier with Joe Casey and others, is the Chairman of the Finance Committee for the Greater Richmond Convention Center Authority. So we are incredibly humbled to be a part of this project, to say the least. As you heard earlier from Mr. Saunders, from Mr. Casey, more importantly, the Greco board is incredibly excited to be a part of this project. I think I'd be remiss without pointing to Jack Berry. If you don't know Jack, please get to know him. Jack Berry has asked for this project for how long, Jack? 25 years from the Hotel Peace alone. And we'll talk more about why that is in a moment. But for those of you that are from out of town and not from the Richmond region, we are a little unique in Virginia as it relates to local governments. So you have 132, I believe, local governments in Virginia. In the Richmond region, the four largest ones being the City of Richmond, Henrico County, Chesterfield County, and Hanover County, and there are others that encompass the region. But we all have separate taxes, we have separate schools, we have separate governments, and it's just the way that Virginia is structured. So I say that because I think it's really, really relevant. When you look at the local governments in this area, If you look at Henrico, Hanover, and Chesterfield, each of those three possess a AAA bond rating. So the highest possible rating, we're 3 out of 48 in the entire country. There's more than 3,000 counties in the country. So you're looking at the best of the best when it comes to the fiscal side of the equation. City of Richmond is a hair away from a AAA as well. So you're literally dealing with 4 of the best run fiscal local governments in the country. So again, an incredible stat. So why is Greca involved in this project? Why are we trying to achieve Mr. Berry's 25-year dream here? So I mentioned earlier, or maybe I didn't. So all 4 of those localities that I talked about earlier, Richmond, Henrico, Chesterfield, and Hanover, all 4 are owners of the building that we're sitting in, believe it or not. City of Richmond is a 50% owner, Henrico is 35%, and then Chesterfield and Hanover make up the other 15% of this. So needless to say, the success of the convention center is of primary importance to all 4 jurisdictions, which is why you've had the support of Greca. And I want to note, and maybe you've read this in the RFI, so every hotel in these 4 jurisdictions collected 8% hotel motel tax or lodging tax. All 8% of those funds are funneled to the convention center to start. And Ms. Basie here, who works for Chesterfield and for the convention center, tabulates what debt services are, what operating cost obligations, capital reserves, and so forth. And then at the end of the day, there's a net payment back to the localities that we overpaid and it comes back. So the success of this convention center is of primary importance to all 4 of these localities. And I can tell you, and Michael Myers, who's the operator at this facility, will tell you all day, in its best years, the convention center was around 40% of capacity. So there is room for growth, and there's a reason why it's at 40%. As Jack will tell you all day long, we just don't have the hotel rooms here. We've been hamstrung, if you will, by not having blocks of hotel rooms that we can lock down for large conventions. And frankly, the entire region, thanks to a lot of work that Mr. Berry does, are busy. The hotel rooms are the capacity is incredibly high, even post-COVID. I'll note that last fiscal year, the 4 localities and the 8% lodging tax I mentioned, we had a record fiscal year last fiscal year in collections, which beat the previous record that was pre-COVID. But I'll tell you, I presented to the Greca board just a few hours ago that this fiscal year, we're actually 21% greater than our best year last fiscal year. So the region is on fire. And again, the success of this facility impacts all 4 localities in Greca as a whole. So without belaboring too much, I just wanted to reiterate the importance of this hotel to the Greca board, to Greca as a whole, to the region as a whole. And I hope I'm touching around the perimeter of why this hotel is important to the region. And we are very humble for all of you coming out today and listening to this presentation. And of course, we'll be available for Q&A afterwards. But thank you again for you all being here.
Thank you, Brandon. I'm now going to introduce Chandra Brigman. She is the President and CEO of Activation Capital, which runs the Biotech Park. And so I'm really excited that she is able to join us today to talk about the Biotech Park, which is just north of the site that is up for redevelopment. And she will share. I need to continue sharing. Yep. So she's going to talk more about Activation Capital and its history. Chandra, take it away. We're very lucky to have Chandra in our region. She moved here during the pandemic and is doing awesome things, which you're going to hear about right now.
Thank you, Marissa. Yes, I did move here during the pandemic. And I get the question often, why did I move from Boston to Richmond? And this presentation kind of explains why. So I'm happy to share today. So a lot of folks don't know what Activation Capital is. We are what I call a public enterprise. We were created by the Commonwealth of Virginia nearly 30 years ago, but we're self-funded. So I love to define an organization as mission-focused, but underpinned with a business model. And how we make our revenue is actually the biotech park. We have office and lab space and parking available. So over the last nearly 30 years, the organization came together. As I said, we were founded by the Commonwealth of Virginia as an independent authority, but we also have a complementary 501c3, which we leverage for our entrepreneurship activity, which I'll go into in a little bit later. And then there was a partnership between the City of Richmond, the Commonwealth, and VCU that spawned the creation of the biotech park, because it wanted to foster the development of a life sciences sector here in Virginia. So Activation Capital today, we are a catalyst for entrepreneurship and innovation, working in 3 different areas. It's fostering the development of an ecosystem, so that's providing convening capacity for the various stakeholders to create the conditions for entrepreneurship and innovation to grow in the region. The example that you might be familiar with is the pharma cluster activity that you might have read about in the papers recently. We created a cluster accelerator to fast track the development of an ecosystem to build out advanced pharmaceutical manufacturing, research and development here in Central Virginia. That group is now called the Alliance for Building Better Medicine. But we had a major milestone recently where we were awarded $52.9 million from the EDA to help build out that cluster. So Activation Capital was the founding entity to stand up the cluster accelerator. That's the kind of work that we do to make sure that we can continue to grow entrepreneurship and innovation in the region. The other activity is space making. Obviously, as I said, building out the biotech park was a major task over the last 20-some years for Activation Capital. And it is a place where not only small emerging startups are able to take their businesses from idea to scale, but is where, as you saw on the tour, large established companies like Altria also have their home. And the last piece is entrepreneurship development. So again, if you look at our mission, it is to really grow advanced technology, entrepreneurship, and innovation. And that's what we were stood up for, by the Commonwealth to do. And so a lot of our work is focused on how do we actually create and maintain that pipeline of entrepreneurs who are building these high growth, high tech companies and helping to grow the local ecosystem. And so, as I said, the bulk of our 20+ year history, we have been building out the park, and I'll talk a little bit later about the next phase of that. The last project that we built was Biotech 8. It is the only site now in the park that actually has space available. In the Biotech Center where my staff and I sit, which was the first building that was built, we're out of wet lab space, and so part of our expansion strategy is to make sure that we have sufficient space in the park. So today, the Biotech Park is 34 acres. We have 1.2 million square feet of office lab space under roof in the park, over 2,000 employees, 70+ companies. And we like to think of the Biotech Park as a nexus of research, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So what are some of the growth drivers? So when I answer this question about why I decided to relocate from a market like Boston to Richmond, when I did a Google Earth search of the location of the biotech park and saw all the assets that were concentrated in one space, what I saw was the perfect ingredients for building out exactly what Maritza has envisioned as this innovation district. Because I worked in Cambridge, Kendall Square, which is considered one of the top innovation ecosystems in the world. And certainly we're not trying to recreate Boston, but all the right bones are here for us to create a very successful, thriving innovation district. And so typically, when you're building out or conceiving of these clusters or innovation districts, you want to build that on assets that are available in the region. I've done talks and worked in a number of different cities around the country, and you hear people talk about Silicon Valley, talk about Boston and New York, and it's great to understand some of the best practices, but you have to build on what your asset base is in the region. What I saw in this region and what others saw in this region is a tremendous array of life science and health sciences assets in the region. And so I pulled this together, my team and I pulled this together for our Build Back Better Regional Challenge application, but we documented clearly close to 90 different assets, and this is not even exhaustive, so close to 90 different assets that are in the region that will really build a foundation for life science and health as a base for innovation and entrepreneurship here. And so our goal with that pharma cluster is to build end-to-end manufacturing, research, and development of advanced pharmaceuticals here in the region. And what we've done is master plan this super hub, a corridor across Greater Richmond and Petersburg, starting in Richmond with the Innovation District Hub. So that is really what Maritza has envisioned here in downtown Richmond, a development hub in Chesterfield, and then the manufacturing hub, which has gotten a lot of coverage in the paper, is a 200-acre manufacturing park in Petersburg. And so my work is not only to help convene the folks that have envisioned what this could be, but also to work on developing out the research and innovation hub here in Central Virginia. Another important driver of demand is the work of VCU in research and IP. And so they've grown exponentially in the last couple of years, the amount of sponsored research that they have. And those of you who've worked in innovation district design before, you know that the university, local university, is very important part of building out a successful, sustainable ecosystem in an innovation district. And VCU has done tremendous work in the last several years, getting up to $400 million in sponsored research. And the vast majority of that is in life sciences. And so we will continue to work, my team will continue to work with them, because a lot of the companies that we want to help grow in the region will come out of this research and the IP that's being developed at the university. And then Activation Capital, when I inherited the organization, was really focused on sort of ecosystem design work, but not a lot of work on the actual space making, which is important. Again, if you worked in innovation district design, you know, the space is actually the physical platform where innovation and entrepreneurship takes place. Is very, very important. And so putting more focus on that, which is why we have this expansion strategy for the biotech park, but also making sure that we think about the conditions that are important for growing entrepreneurship and actually the hands-on work to grow entrepreneurs themselves in the region. So that's our focus. So as I said, we've master planned out the expansion of the park. Currently we have, of the 34 acres, 4 acres that are being used for parking, surface parking, which we plan to redevelop, and we've master planned up to about 300,000 square feet of space that we could build with some parking in the park. The first will be a 102,000 square foot building. I'll go into more detail. If you recall from the tour, it's that Snoopy building, the building that had the Snoopy painting on the side, where we'll start. But we have envisioned about 3 different projects in the available space. Okay. So this first building, we are branding as an innovation center. Again, if you've done work in innovation districts, having a nexus of activity where you not only house an ecosystem of companies in one building, but have a place for networking, for the local community to skill up, is a critical ingredient of these innovation districts. So we envision that this first project will do that for us. Again, we're envisioning about 20,000 square feet of shared lab space, 25,000 of private space, and then 20 to 35 for anchor. And so this is on the corner of Jackson, between Jackson and 8th and 7th Street in the Biotech Park. So again, this is best practices, amenity-rich space, a space where networking and events and programming can happen, but upskilling also for the local community. So again, just to kind of summarize, when I've lived in places like Boston, I've also lived in Washington, D.C. and Austin, Texas. So some of the principles at play that I think will really be drivers for the growth in the region is that, clusters that are successful, they specialize. And I just gave the example of how we worked on this advanced pharmaceutical manufacturing cluster and have seen some early successes with that. Collaboration is key. Typically when you have a smaller region and smaller relative to Boston and some of the places I've lived, smaller regions, is really important for multiple jurisdictions to partner in order to be competitive and be successful. And we see that here in the region. And this focus on home growing the entrepreneurial talent is very important. So what Leonard and his team does in terms of recruiting companies to the region is important, but an investment in home growing entrepreneurs is very important, because 99.9% of entrepreneurs typically in smaller markets are going to be homegrown. So we see a lot of activity in that area. And then proximity. So all of this work to create live, work, play is very important. Living in a place like Kendall Square, the talent that you're going to attract, the companies that you're going to attract to the region, they want to walk to work. They're not going to want to get in a car and drive. They want to make sure all those amenities are in close proximity to their work. So that's very important for growing the region. But also, as I just presented, having all of these various players inside one building like the Innovation Center is going to also be an important driver. Then I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Chandra. That was a good overview of Activation Capital. The reason that I wanted her to come talk is that I think a lot of people know about VCU Health and they're very aware of Reynolds College and the convention center, but they're not as aware of Biotech Park and all the work that Chandra's leading with Activation Capital. So wanted to share that stage with her. Let me pull my presentation back up and then reshare. It's always harder to do when a lot of people are watching. There we go. Okay. So again, for people listening to this later, my name is Maritza Mercado Peachin, and I am the project manager for the City Center solicitation process. I am also Deputy Director for Equitable Development with the City of Richmond. And in that role, I help implement Richmond 300, the citywide master plan. So a couple of milestones to get to where we are. We initiated a small area planning process in 2020, and then we adopted that plan in 2022, and so at the beginning of this year. And then Leonard mentioned it earlier, but the City Council transferred the Coliseum property, the building and the grounds to the EDA in order to help facilitate this process. With that was a cooperation agreement that kind of identified some of the key goals that we needed to accomplish with the solicitation, and then also had city staff be committed to help support the process. And so that's why you have city staff staffing the EDA, so to speak, in this process. Another thing that happened was RHA, the Richmond Redevelopment and Housing Authority transferred the Blues Armory building, because that used to be owned by RHA. They transferred it to the EDA as well. So now it's one big assemblage of about 9.4 acres, and that all happened in May, and it was all recorded in November earlier this month. Another thing that we did, a couple of my staff here helped lead this, was rezone the property. So the zoning it didn't allow residential in some parts, and there was a height limit based off of inclined plane. That's all gone now. So now you can do residential everywhere. You can do lab space everywhere. You can build buildings that are not conforming to the inclined plane. There are some form requirements and some setback requirements. So now this whole area is zoned Research Park, not this building, not the convention center, but everything else. So that's another thing that happened. The zoning's in place to facilitate the kind of development we want. I'm going to talk a little bit about the small area plan. I think it's about 100, or maybe not even 70 pages long. Pretty easy to read. You should take a look on our website. But the vision is, Chandra just talked about all the elements for an innovation district, and we have a lot of the hardest elements to get, which are the really strong anchor institutions. And the vision is that this area becomes an urban innovation district that's a destination, that's a place where people want to stay and be, not just work, but live, spend some time outside, visit, and there's these 5 guiding principles. And as Chandra kind of said, all of the pieces are in place for this. We have VCU generating all of that, attracting all those funds for their life sciences research. We have the Biotech Park kind of growing entrepreneurship and attracting companies. We have Reynolds Community College educating people in allied health professions. And then we're adjacent to a lot of strong and growing neighborhoods. Additionally, this part of town is in the middle of downtown, which has attracted $3.6 billion of investment. This is according to Venture Richmond's Downtown Report, which is an appendix to the RFI. And we're investing in improving access to this part of the city through various modes. So I like to say it's over 175 years in the making, because that's about as old as VCU Health is. And now we just need to bring in the other pieces hotel, open space, residential, retail, some like gridded streets back in. So this is an overview of the biotech. So you can see where Biotech Park sits at the top of kind of what I like to call the hole in the middle of downtown. Really, the Coliseum is the biggest hole in the middle of downtown. And so we envision the small area plan and this project, these 9.4 acres, stitching together that hole by bringing in streets and by bringing in buildings that address the streets and more activity and more people. There used to be way more people who lived in downtown than we have today. And you can read those stats in the small area plan. So you're all here because you got this request for interest. Thank you for coming. The submissions are due in about 3 weeks. And it's the first of what we envision as a 2-stage process. And we'll have a request for interest that's out right now, due December 20th. We'll shortlist an announcement in winter. They will be invited to respond to a request for offers. And then the evaluation panel will recommend a preferred team to the EDA and GRECA. To summarize the development goals in the RFI, 1 is to demolish the Coliseum. 2 is to adaptively reuse the Blues Armory. One of my staff members found a set of the original blueprints for Blues Armory, so we'll be posting those today on our website. The building did not use historic tax credits when it was renovated most recently, but it could use historic tax credits in the future. It does not have, it is a registered building, national and state, but it's not in a local historic district, for people who understand those things. Another goal, and when we were walking on the Coliseum grounds, you probably saw, I'm trying to use my mouse, it's kind of small for you guys, but another goal is to introduce some streets. So bringing Clay Street back through, bringing 6th Street back through. And if you all toured the Coliseum grounds, we were at a part where you're like looking over Lee Street. That could be a vehicular connector too, up that high. Right now it's a big pedestrian plaza, but there could be potentially a road that is at the same grade as the Coliseum is today, if you're following me, that connects 5th and 7th. Maybe it's not a really big road, but it's just another, loading or helping with circulation in the area. So reconnecting the grid is a big thing. Having, for urban planners out there, having those big super blocks really impedes walkability. In all of these slides, there's a little footnote that says these images are just illustrative. It doesn't have to look exactly like this. They're just kind of to inspire everybody. And in orange is outlined the 9.4 acres that are included in the RFI solicitation. So another thing is to develop a signature hotel. This could potentially be the site, or maybe where the blue buildings are, but in purple here on 5th Street, this could be a good location for a hotel with a bridge that could connect over to the convention center, because 5th Street is a really nice direct access from the highway, and then the proximity to the convention center would be great for a flagship hotel. There are other sites that could also work for hotel, and maybe there's not just one hotel, maybe there's 2. This is where you guys, as you move to RFO and get more kind of detailed in your plans, that will come into play. We'd also see that there potentially could be room for office, but again, it's up to you all and your expertise to determine what you think would work. Residential, we'd like to see some residential in this area. Chandra will talk about how her staff come and they get employed, or entrepreneurs get employed by the biotech park and they can't live anywhere nearby. And people who work in this space, who work in wet labs and who work in hospitals, like a lot of times like to live really close so they can just roll out of bed and go straight to work, but there's like nowhere for them to live in this area. The small area plan shows some key streets where we think retail would make sense. We're aware that retail doesn't work on every ground level, but it would be nice to have some retail as appropriate in the area. There's an idea of taking the hole. Once Coliseum comes down, there'll be a really big hole, and there's right now it's a pedestrian entrance into the lower level of the Coliseum off of Lee Street. That maybe could be an entrance to an underground parking, maybe a level of parking. Again, these are just kind of ideas of trying to accommodate parking with kind of the infrastructure that we have. Transit, we want to make sure we take advantage of transit. So there's currently, there's the Pulse runs on Broad Street. There are talks about looking at a north-south BRT route that hasn't been finalized, but even if north-south BRT does or does not come to this area, there's a lot of bus service. So we want to make sure we accommodate bus service, and also the Fall Line Trail, which is the 43-mile bike path that will go from Ashland to Petersburg, is going to come straight through here. And so it'll come through the Biotech Park and down 7th Street. So that is at kind of the edge of the development site. And then it'll go down to the river and down over to Manchester. So that'll be a really good connector. As Chandra mentioned, like people who work in innovation, they want lots of different modes of how to get around. And so having that shared use path coming through will be a good asset to the community. Open space, trying to design high quality open space to connect the spaces. Again, you can see the development site is outlined in orange. And then we have some community goals about making sure that there's places for families and children to come. That could be the way you program open space. Making sure that there's connectivity to the other neighborhoods. We're very close to Jackson Ward and to Biotech Park and VCU, and we don't want to like turn our backs on any of those places, but figure out ways to open doors to those areas. Sustainability, employment, making sure there's opportunities for minority and emerging small businesses. And then finally, there's fiscal goals, creating new revenue for the city, the EDA, and GRECA, and using a financing approach that minimizes public investment and maximizes private investment. So the evaluation panel will use evaluation criteria very similar to other solicitations we've done in the past, and being qualified, team, having experience with urban mixed-use projects, providing equitable development benefits, and the small area plan at the end has a list of those, and then also in the RFI there's an appendix with some minimum equitable development benefits. And then having an understanding of what the project is with a sound financial approach. So the next steps are to submit any questions you have to me via email by December 4th. And then we are gonna turn around answers as fast as possible. And then submitting responses to Leonard and Brandon on December 20th. So with that, we have about half an hour for questions, and we need to use the microphone so I can, and I'll repeat it on the microphone too, so it gets on the recording that we're doing. So anyone have questions that they want to share?
And this presentation will be posted on the website.
Yes, thank you. This presentation will be posted after this meeting on the website, along with the Blues Armory blueprints as a separate addendum. Questions? Sometimes people don't like to ask questions in these groups. Yes? Yes, that would be great. It's not even on. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
You talk about parking in the area. It doesn't seem to be an issue. The number of parking structures. What do you control? What do you not control?
It looks like Leonard's ready to talk, so here, I'll give him a microphone.
questions about parking and how much does the city control versus what it doesn't control. And so Matt, I'm going to ask you to jump in and help with this as well. There are several parking structures that the city owns in this immediate area. The city operates a parking enterprise through our Department of Public Works, and there are several monthly leases. And so while there are, there are a significant amount of monthly leases to monthly users of the office, of the parking space. Long story short, there's not a lot of excess parking availability for this development. As we've contemplated this development and in some of the conceptual renderings that you saw, a part of the objective is for this development, this redeveloped 9.5 acres, to also include the associated required on-site parking as well. Understanding that one, there's a hotel that's desired, two, there's commercial space from an office and life sciences standpoint that the small area plan speaks to, and three, there's a great residential opportunity. And so the objective is to figure out how to creatively solve for parking. Matt, did I miss anything on the parking side?
Other questions? A lot of times these groups are quiet because it's a competition. So what else?
Yeah, I would also say that, I would also add, use your best creativity. If there's something that you think would work or needs to work to solve for any and everything that we have asked for in this request for interest, put it in writing. We understand clearly that there's a mix of stuff that has to happen for this redevelopment project to be successful. We have seen on another large-scale redevelopment project just west of here, the Diamond District, where there are appropriate creative solutions that the development team proposed there that work. And so we're confident that while this is a much smaller site, there's a critical mass of development that can happen, that should happen, that makes sense to be able to solve for a number of things like parking.
And at this stage, the RFI outlines all of the requirements for submissions, but it's the qualifications, resumes, past experience, and a little bit on, your vision for the site. It'll go into more detail. We'll ask for more detail rather from the shortlisted folks who are invited to respond to the request for offers.
Can you talk a little bit about the armory? When it was constructed, when the appendage was added, when was the last remodel?
Can I talk about the armory? I don't know when it was constructed, but maybe someone in this room does. 1910? Someone say that? 1910. So the armory was constructed in 1910, and it was the renovation was added in the 80s. And you all moved out in like 2006 from the space. I'm looking at Jack Berry because they used to have offices. That second level, when we toured it, those used to, the Richmond Tourism used to be in that space. And in terms of like adaptively reusing it, that's where we want to see some creativity of ideas of how it could be used.
The small area plan, that's one of the attachments, one of the appendices, shows 6th Street, the street grid, 6th Street being cut back through. So obviously, what's oftentimes referred to as the Crystal Palace, the glass enclosure, can't be there for that. There's another development team that swung at a redevelopment project that would have adaptively reused it. They did some assessment on their own, and their determination was that Crystal Palace part could be removed without destroying the integrity of the 6th Street facing facade of the historic Blues Armory. But the building, so for folks that, and I would encourage any and everyone to have their own independent analysis done, but from that development team, that was their assessment. so that structure could be removed, and then, of course, just opening up that causeway for the recreation of 6th Street going back through.
So we envision it coming down the class instruction. And that Blues Armory building used to front a street there. And it used to like front the sidewalk, but now it's, you know, part of a old food court. So that would kind of, you have to use your imagination of how that would kind of be transformed. Other questions? All right.
Okay, who came out just for the free lunch today?
Well, I'm going to put my email address, which everyone should have, but maritza.peachin@rva.gov on the screen, so you can email me your questions and we'll issue an addendum with responses. If I could have Sam and Brian stand up, where are you guys? Sam and Brian were very helpful in organizing this whole thing. They deserve a round of applause. So thank you everyone for coming, and if you have questions, you know how to get in touch with us. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone. Good job.